1 second.
I respectfully decline.
When was Bryan Kohberger identified as a suspect? If you know anything about this case, then you know on November 13th of 2022, 4 University of Idaho students were murdered in their off-campus home in Moscow, Idaho. Their names are Ethan Chapin, Xana Kernodle, Madison Mogen, and Kaylee Goncalves. And we think of them and their families as we continue to discuss this case. Now we're back at discussing this case even though Bryan Kohberger has already been sentenced and transferred to his forever home unless he gets moved out of state at some point. He's in the Idaho Maximum Security Institution right now, and his mugshot was recently released. And so the Moscow Police Department has decided to make a link that everyone can use to download all their police reports, which I'm very grateful for, because we don't see that often either. That it's free, that it's available to download, and there's 314 documents. Now, I have read through every single one because I feel like I really need to. I just can't miss a document, even if it's just a search warrant that they applied for or a thumb drive that they're handing over to someone. I wanted to read through every single one so that I'm sure that I can bring you the most important information, right? So the first question that I had was, when exactly did they identify him as a suspect? We've heard a lot along the way, but in these documents, some things are cleared up, and I must say, other things just bring about more questions. So today, let's focus on 4 documents. Firstly is this one. He was identified as a suspect on December 19th of 2022. At that point, he was already at his parents' house in Pennsylvania, and he was then arrested, which is the next document I want to show you. So on December 29th of 2022, ISP Detective Sergeant Gilbertson, FBI Special Agent Shirley, and I arrived in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania in preparation for the service of the arrest and search warrants for Kohberger and his family's residence at redacted Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. After several coordination meetings, Detective Gilbertson, SA Shirley, and I drove to the Pennsylvania State Police Barracks at Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, to await the arrival of Kohberger after his arrest to interview him upon his arrival. At approximately 2 in the morning, 200 hours, on December 30th of 2022, Kohberger was brought to the PSP Stroudsburg barracks and placed in an interview room. The interview was recorded on the built-in video system at the barracks, as well as Detective Gilbertson's pocket recorder. Detective Gilbertson and I were the interviewers present. This is a summary of our interview with Kohberger and is not a verbatim transcript of the interview. So at some point, I'm sure Freedom of Information Act's requests will be made, even by myself and Grizzly Cat, because I want to know what that was all about. In fact, obviously we'd like to see the video, right? A full interview transcription will be attached to the case file. Detective Gilbertson and I began by introducing ourselves and stating which agencies we represented. When I stated who I was, Kohberger stated, "You do look familiar." Detective Gilbertson and I prepared our note-taking materials, and Detective Gilbertson read Kohberger his Miranda rights advisement. Detective Gilbertson asked Kohberger if he understood his rights, to which he replied he did. After collecting Kohberger's personal information and inquiring about any medications, Detective Gilbertson and I began to speak to Kohberger. Detective Gilbertson asked Kohberger about the SWAT operation at the house, to which Kohberger replied that he was concerned about his parents and his dog. Detective Gilbertson asked Kohberger if he was going to Washington State University, to which he replied he was. We made small talk with Kohberger about sports for some time. Kohberger stated he didn't follow WSU football much, but was a baseball fan. Detective Gilbertson asked Kohberger if he had only been at WSU for 1 semester. Kohberger confirmed this and said he came to WSU with his father on July 1st. Kohberger then went on to say that he was a first-year PhD student in criminal justice and criminology. Detective Gilbertson asked Kohberger what the process was to apply for a PhD. Kohberger stated that he applied to 2 places, UC Irvine and WSU. He said he was going to graduate with his master's degree in criminal justice from DeSales and was inspired. Kohberger then asked if it was okay to engage in small talk like we were, to which we replied it was. After briefly mentioning he was strengthened by the fact his mother and father were okay, Kohberger said that he applied to the 2 aforementioned schools because they did not require the GRE exam. Kohberger then spoke about the GRE for a brief time and then said he was accepted by WSU. Detective Gilbertson then asked Kohberger what led him down the road of becoming a professor. Kohberger stated it was because he loved being in college and stated knowledge was far more important to him than money. Kohberger added WSU had a good program to study under, and they said, "You guys know all about this more than likely." Kohberger then asked questions about University of Idaho and other Idaho universities before stating that he didn't know much about Idaho or Washington and had not left the tri-state area much. Kohberger then returned to speaking about his focus on learning and how he thought he could obtain his doctorate degree. Kohberger then said he recently returned home to see his family. Detective Gilbertson then asked Kohberger about his time at DeSales University. Kohberger spoke for some time about his time at Northampton Community College and DeSales. Kohberger then spoke about how he became interested in criminal justice and stated that he thought about being a police officer but did not want to make that commitment unless he was absolutely sure. Kohberger then continued to speak about his education and universities. He also spoke more about the process to get into a PhD program and how competitive it can be. Detective Gilbertson then asked Kohberger about his move to Washington. Kohberger said he drove across the country and wanted the challenge of driving cross-country and experiencing it with his father. Kohberger then said he took a different route back home with his father for Christmas break to avoid snow. Kohberger spoke about his travels and the risks of such travels in winter. Kohberger then began to speak about the beauty of the environment and its relationship to God and a higher power. We spoke about this for some time, and Kohberger said that he was raised Christian, but was always a skeptic except when confronted with the beauty of the natural world. Detective Gilbertson asked Kohberger if he had ever been to the Pacific Northwest prior to coming to WSU, and Kohberger said he had not. I asked Kohberger if he and his father made any stops along their way back to Pennsylvania. He told me they visited Colorado, but the main goal was just to drive. Kohberger then told a story about seeing an unmarked police car near Kansas City speed up behind him, catch up to another vehicle, turn on its emergency lights, and then drive away. Kohberger thought this was strange and was unsure why it occurred. Detective Gilbertson then asked Kohberger about the job he mentioned. Kohberger stated that he was a teaching assistant. He then talked about how busy he was and how the funding package that comes along with being a teaching assistant is what makes the extra work worth it. Kohberger then discussed ongoing projects with WSU PD and Pullman PD. Kohberger spoke more about how being a TA is essentially assisting the professors and the department. He stated he did not get to assist with teaching with the exception of assisting with office hours. Detective Gilbertson asked Kohberger if he would be a TA again next semester, and he replied that he would. Kohberger then stated that he understood why we were engaging in small talk, but would appreciate it if we explained to him what he was doing there. Detective Gilbertson asked Kohberger why he thought we were there. He said he wanted Detective Gilbertson to tell him. Detective Gilbertson said we were there because of what occurred in Moscow, but did not provide any further detail. Detective Gilbertson asked Kohberger if he watched the news. Kohberger said, I watched the news. Detective Gilbertson then asked Kohberger why he thought I looked familiar. He said he wasn't sure and stated I had a familiar face and looked like someone he used to know. Detective Gilbertson then said we were there because of what happened in November just off the University of Idaho campus. Detective Gilbertson asked Kohberger if he knew what that was too, which Kohberger replied, of course. When prompted to elaborate, he said that it was the incident we had been investigating for, how long has it been? Kohberger said there were probably several incidents, and then said that he was aware of a homicide because of a WSU alert that he received. Detective Gilbertson asked when Kohberger received the alert. He said he wasn't sure, but thought it was sometime the previous month. Detective Gilbertson confirmed that was why we're there, and asked if Kohberger wanted to talk about that. Kohberger replied, well, I think I would need a lawyer. Kohberger then asked if we would explain to him what we were there for specifically, and added he was tired. Detective Gilbertson again stated we were investigating the homicides of the 4 students, and that we had questions and things we hoped that Kohberger would help us understand. He sat back and said that he had the utmost respect for law enforcement, but stated it was a constitutional right to speak to an attorney. Detective Gilbertson affirmed this. Kohberger then rearranged and said that the only thing he heard from Moscow was an alert that came to his phone. He said that he wanted to talk to an attorney. Detective Gilbertson said we would stop now because Kohberger wanted to speak to an attorney. Kohberger then asked where his parents were and where his dog was. Kohberger re-engaged again and asked what questions we would have for him. Detective Gilbertson then asked Kohberger again if he understood his rights and asked specifically what Kohberger wished. Kohberger asked what specifically we wanted to talk to him about and the reason. I told Kohberger that he invoked his Fifth Amendment rights and we were not going to ask him any further questions. Kohberger asked again for the reason that he was there, but added that he would like to talk to an attorney. At this point, we concluded our interview with Kohberger and left the room. And of course, as we know, he was arrested and he didn't leave jail since that day. That was in Pennsylvania. Then he was extradited to Moscow, Idaho. He was booked into the Latah County Jail and later moved to the Ada County Jail. So now let's look at this document, which is sequence number 303. And this is about what an inmate observed about him while he was in jail. On Monday, September 16th of 2024, I spoke to Redacted. He was an inmate at the Latah County Jail at the time and had been housed next to Kohberger since August of 2024 until Kohberger's transport to Ada County on September 15th of 2024. I was made aware by Detective Vargas that Redacted spoke about Kohberger while on a phone call with his mother. I responded to the Latah County Jail and spoke to Redacted. I began by asking what he thought of Kohberger having had to live next to him. He told me that Kohberger was highly intelligent and polite for the most part. He told me that Kohberger would often question him about his past criminal offenses and why he was in the maximum security wing of the jail. I asked him what he thought of Kohberger's intelligence. He stated that Kohberger was the smartest person that he had encountered while in confinement. He told me Kohberger quickly became annoying because of some of his habits. He told me Kohberger would wash his hands dozens of times each day and would spend 45 minutes to an hour in the shower. The only comment I want to make there is I did not know they could even do that. I didn't know they were allowed to spend that much time in the shower, right? I always thought it's like in, out, I don't know. I asked Redacted if Kohberger slept at night. He told me Kohberger would be awake almost all night and would only take a nap during the day. He said that he could hear Kohberger moving around all night, which also annoyed him. I asked him if Kohberger ever lost his temper. He told me on one occasion Kohberger was video chatting with his mother, which he said he did for hours each day while he was watching sports. He said, so this inmate said, "You suck," to one of the players on the team, at which point Kohberger immediately got up, put his face to the bars, and aggressively asked if he was talking about him or his mother. He said this was the only time that Kohberger lost his temper. I asked him if Kohberger had mentioned anything about the crimes that he was charged with. He said Kohberger did not mention his alleged offenses at all. He also told me Kohberger was excited to move to Ada County and stated this inmate said that he had served time at Ada County and noted he did not think that Kohberger would like to be there. I thanked him for speaking with me and advised him to notify the Latah County detention deputies if he remembered anything else that he wished to tell me. Okay, and lastly for today, because now we're just looking at 4 documents out of 314, right? Number 263. This one says, on Wednesday, March 13th of 2024, I received an email from Captain Blaker, who still receives voicemail tips reference this case. Captain Blaker sent me 2 tips for additional follow-up. The first tip was called in by, and that's redacted. She stated she thought that she had matched with Kohberger in September or October of 2022 on Tinder. And remember, the murders happened November 13th of 2022. So September or October of 2022. I called Redacted and asked her to elaborate on her voicemail. She stated that she signed up for Tinder in September or October of 2022, but she was unable to match with anyone in her area. She stated she paid for the additional Tinder feature, which allowed her to move a pin anywhere in the country to see if she could match with someone. She stated that she matched with Kohberger a short time later and began to talk to him. She said that Kohberger told her that he was a criminology student at WSU. The two communicated via Tinder and planned for Kohberger to visit her when he came home for Christmas break that year. She then told me that she had a friend who had been murdered in her town a couple of years prior. She said she discussed this with Kohberger. The conversation turned to horror movies and which one she liked the most. So that's an odd turn of conversation. Like, opening up about a tragedy, losing a friend to murder, and he pivots the conversation to, so what are your favorite horror movies? Okay, she told Kohberger that she liked the Rob Zombie Halloween movies. To this, she said that Kohberger asked what she thought would be the worst way to die. She said that she thought it would be a knife. She said Kohberger then asked her something to the effect of, like a K-bar? She said she didn't know what that was and had to Google it. She said that she eventually stopped talking to Kohberger because his questions made her uncomfortable. Oh my goodness. So she said when Kohberger was arrested, she recognized his photo and remembered the comment about the K-bar knife. She said she attempted to call the tip line, but had been unable to verify whether or not she called the MPD tip line. There's no record of her calling the FBI tip line. She said she no longer had access to her Tinder profile and could not get her user ID. This would be needed to compare the Tinder records located on Kohberger's phone. At this time, there's nothing to corroborate the tip. I will just read this to you for the sake of finishing the document. They said the second tip was referenced to a redacted driver, SS, who thought that he saw Kohberger. I called and asked him to tell me what he saw. He said he delivers packages to the area of Pullman where Kohberger resided during 2022. He said he recognized Kohberger and had seen him while delivering packages to the area on prior occasions. Told me that on this occasion he referenced in his tip he noticed a man dressed in all black with boxing or elf shoes standing on a footpath behind the Terraview Drive. This footpath provided an unobstructed view of apartment, redacted, where, redacted, said the female tenants would be visible through a large window. Redacted said seeing the man, who he said looked like Kohberger from what he could see, was unusual given the location. They said that he was not positive the man was Kohberger, but he resembled Kohberger's appearance. Told me that he spoke to an FBI investigator early on, but wanted to make sure the information was passed on. I concluded my phone interview with and thanked him. Neither of the two conversations above were recorded. So, I mean, this could have been him, right? Both of these could have been him, but there's no absolute confirmation that it was. But if he literally asked this lady like a K-bar, I mean, it's very likely that it was him. And we also know from previous deep dives that he was on Tinder. He went on dates with some of the women that he matched with. If you missed all of that, then it's on the playlist for you. There's deep dives that I've done into his background, you know, from as far back as I could go. From what he did in high school, where he worked after that, all of that, right? What friends said, interviews that I found, it's all on the playlist. There's actually recent videos that I did on that as well. So you might want to check that out, right? Okay, so those are the 4 documents that I wanted to bring to you today, especially for those of you who just want the information. You just want me to read the documents to you like that, give you the bullet points, and that's what we did here. So thank you so much for watching, and I will most certainly see you in the next one. Stay safe.